Hello there, my name is Lauren. I'm the Family History Librarian at City of Greater Dandenong Libraries, and I'd like to welcome you here. Today, I'd like to introduce you to the basics of exploring your family history and some tips on using the Ancestry Library Edition database to locate your ancestors. Right now, we have been given an amazing opportunity, and I want to encourage as many of you as I can to benefit. This opportunity involves being able to access Ancestry Library Edition from the comforts of your own home. Access to this database is normally restricted to in-library use only, but Ancestry has enabled home access during lockdown. So, at present, access from home extends to the end of August 2020. All you need in order to do this is a smart device with internet access, your CGD library card and PIN. Firstly, I'm going to explain to you how to access Ancestry Library Edition from your home device. As you can see on screen, we've started in the greaterdandenong.com Council homepage. We take our cursor down to the centre of the page to the library icon and select that. We then take the cursor down to the Vault Online Services and select that. And now over to the online services once again and select. Scroll down now to the Family History and Genealogy option and select, which opens up the Ancestry Library Edition link. Select that. And that brings us to the login page where you'll enter your library card number starting with A and your PIN and select Login. And once verified, you click on the Go to Ancestry Library Edition a final time. And here we are in the City of Greater Dandenong Ancestry Library Edition home screen. Starting at the home screen, there are many different search options that you can take. Coming down to the Begin Searching, if we click on that. Now this is quite a broad search, remembering that Ancestry has 16.6 billion records. It's one of the world's largest online family history resources, so it can be quite overwhelming. In terms of this search, you can start if you don't have a lot of information about a person, maybe a first and last name. You may know or may be able to guess where your ancestor lived. Even the same goes with the birth year, if you have that information or not. This can give you a bit of direction sometimes. It's quite broad, but that can often be a good start. And just to explain a little bit about what's happening down here, if you have a look at the different regions of the world, if you scroll over each of them or hover over each of them, and you can then see, if you go to the different regions in that area, how many collections, and that's family history resources, that they have for that particular area. So as you can see, the different collection numbers there, Victoria, New South Wales and so forth. So that can often be a good starting point if you're wanting to look for somewhere for ancestors of overseas origin. That's also good too. Now coming back to the home page, different ways that we can be searching. If you want to be a bit more specific, and often that is a good way to go about it, narrowing down your search results. First of all, here we have by a special collection being the census collection. Now, it's probably more relevant to the UK, and if you scroll down here, US census records, they have a lot of that still kept that you can access, not so relevant for Australia. This is the search of idols is probably the one that's very, very relevant to us. This, in my view, is the backbone of family history research. This is what's going to prove, going to verify, give you documentation to support whatever it is that you find through Ancestry. So this is quite an important search here, or special collection really. Over here then is search military, a lot of service records and that sort of thing from from all of the world wars really. and search immigration, same sort of thing if you wanted to know passenger lists and dates people arrived in Australia and so forth, or in other countries as well. Up the top here at our search menu, our menu bar, we have an option here to search, and it gives you similar sort of breakdowns of special collections. You can once again go across all categories like the begin searching option, and census and voter lists, birth, marriage, death, military, immigration and travel, and the card catalogue, which is the old searching way that was on the original Ancestry, I believe, and people have asked to have that kept there because they're familiar with that way of accessing their information. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through a sample search, but just before I start that, I want to take you through a few additional points that are quite good for you to remember when approaching your family history research. Firstly, whether it's online or paper-based, recording all your family history findings in a family tree from the start makes a lot of sense. It's a good idea to find out as much information as you can from talking to family members and gather things like birth, death, marriage certificates or data, or even the facts is quite good. Anything that you can find is quite useful and can save you money down the track, because it does cost money to access those, to actually get a copy of those forms, those certificates. The charts and form option up here in the menu actually gives you some supporting forms that can help you keep track of what you're doing in terms of your resource, because like I said, it's a lot of records you're searching here on the database. So it's like, if you can keep track of them, that can always help you. It's very easy to forget whether you've done the search and what you found from that search when you last did it. And also another interesting point is, an important point to remember, is that a lot of data is being added to the database constantly. So you can find that a search that you did last year gives different results to what it does if you try to do it today. So it can be very, very useful keeping some of these resources and being able to access where you're at in terms of your searching. Okay. Also, always start with yourself when you're doing your family history, and go back a generation at a time. And as you're going back, you want to be verifying your findings as you go along. Otherwise, it can be a big waste of money and a waste of time too. Try not, as tempting as it can be, to skip a generation and go straight for that famous relative, distant ancestor that you've been told about, because if you just jump straight in, you may not find that you're actually connected, or they're part of your ancestry at all. So you really do need to go back a generation at a time. And also for females, when you're entering females in your family tree, always use their maiden name in the family tree. Another important point just to note is that Ancestry has an amazing tool as what it is. It's not going to decipher your results for you. It's a bit like being a detective, where you gather many clues along the way, and you need to check if they support what it is that you're looking for, if that person does belong or how they belong. And like a detective, you also need proof, and that's what I was talking about. It's often suggested that 2 documents, and vital documents when we're talking about birth, deaths and marriage, that's what we tend to look for as a minimum, just to support that person is truly part of your lineage there. Yep. Now, for my sample search, I'm going to use the well-known past Melbourne VFL, AFL footballer and coach, Ron Barassi, that is, as my sample search. I've selected Ron because he's already in the public domain, as he's been on the television show Who Do You Think You Are in the past. And in terms of, I'll just go back to the search screen. In terms of looking for Ron, however, if I wanted to start with Ron, and look for his vitals, say his birth certificate, I'm going to get stuck for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that although Ancestry gives you full text of a lot of different records, things like newspaper articles, census records, court documents, service records, and so on, in terms of vital records, it only acts as a pointer in the sense that it's directing you. It gives you some information, but not the full context, the full extent of what you can find on the original or the actual family history document, whether that's the birth, death, or marriage document. So you do need to go to a next source for that. Some people will take what they find as gospel. However, I've found that mistakes can arise from that, and it can be quite easy to attach someone to your family tree as being verified, when if you go further and look at the actual document, you'll see, hold on, that isn't correct at all for whatever reason. So it is a good point to always make sure you're following up right back to the full document, the extent of the full document, to see all the information you can find there. Now, secondly, there's another, and it's a legal reason why I wouldn't be able to find anything for Ron Barassi if I was to do a search for his birth certificate. It's because there are legal periods of restriction for things like births, deaths, marriages in Australia. Now, this is due to our privacy law, and many of these records are not accessible within certain time periods. For example, birth certificates cannot be accessed until 100 years from the birth date has passed. So Ron wasn't born before 1920, which is what it would have to be in terms of me being able to access his birth certificate. And another point too, he's actually alive. So that's what I think that's really trying to cover too. We don't want to be accessing people's personal information like that when they're still alive. That's another important point. In terms of marriages are not accessible for 60 years. So therefore it wouldn't be until anything after 1960 is unavailable, any marriages after that date. Deaths is a lesser time frame. It's 30 years from death. So no death certificate documentation would be available if the individual died after 1990 at this point in time, just based on today's current date. So that's an important point to always remember when searching for births, deaths, marriages, and you can get stuck when you can't find something. It's not always because it's not there, it's because it hasn't yet been added to the Ancestry database, or it's not accessible. I'm going to do a sample search to show you what I mean about Ron Barassi if I did try to search for him now, in the instance that I forgot that I'm unable to find any information on his birth certificate at this point in time. So I've gone into the broad begin searching option, and I'm going to just type in his name, and I happen to know, actually I'll type in all of his name because I know his name from listening to football commentary, Ronald Dale Barassi. And I do happen to know, and this is not from football commentary, he was born in Castlemaine. That was because this is all online too, Castlemaine. And you can see how you get prompted. As I start typing in Castlemaine, it gives me the option there for the match, the nearest match. And so I'm going to select Castlemaine, Victoria, Australia. And I happen to know his birth year is 1936. Whoops, wrong way. 1936. So I'm not going to, although I do know that is exact, I don't often search via exact options because I always like to leave room for error, because you will get different errors occurring. I just tend to not do that with my first search. I like to go broad first, so I'm just going to click on the search option. If I wanted to, there's another option here where you can add in more details to do with Ron, but that's fairly detailed what I've put in there already. So I'm going to click on search, and I'm just going to show you what comes up. Now this is a broad search, so it's searching across all of the different collections, and you can see I have found someone called Ronald Dale Barassi, However, the information that I'm only getting is to do with electoral rolls, and if this is the same Ronald Dale Barassi, which I would need to check that too, because it's quite easy for people who have the same name to be then added to your data when it's in fact isn't. But in this case, possibly it is. So if I scroll down, you can see it's all electoral rolls here, and we get down to something here which is a bit different. Marriage, the Victorian Australia Marriage Index, but it's for someone different. It's for Mary Dale, so that's not a correct result anyway. It's not what we're looking for. So that's just to show you, and from that was like 1,006 results. So it's not really what we're looking for. And you can see here that the way the search works is that it'll tend to start you off broadly. And if you want to narrow that in, because you know his name is definitely Ronald Dale, and you could narrow that in as close as you want to get. And like I said, I tend not to go exact, only because I just don't think it leaves any room for any error at all. So I like to go in close, but not so close. And I'd be careful with regions too, because sometimes the name, the hospital, suburb or town where you were born doesn't always match with what it says in your birth certificate, or even where you lived. You live might be different to where you were born. So sometimes it doesn't always match. So I'm even more so likely to do an exact search for region or area. Okay, so I'm going to update that search now, and I'll just show you the difference when I click on that, what happens as I move my search filters. Okay, well, look what it's done. It's shown me no good results for Ronald Dale Barassi, and that's perhaps as it should. As I've become more exact in my search, it's saying, well, there's nothing in here for what you're looking for. So that makes sense. So let's go back to the home page now. And what I do know, and this is what you would tend to do, you would tend to start searching from perhaps someone at the age of Ronald's parents, which would probably be my grandparents, and you might want to start searching for their birth certificate. Apologies. I'm going to search for the marriage certificate, rather, of Ron's parents, being Ronald James Barassi and Elsa Bryant Ray. So I'm going to go into search, birth, marriage and death. And I'm going to type Ron's dad's name in here. And his spouse, I'll type her name down the bottom here. Elsa Bryant Ray. Now I'm going to type their year of marriage in there as well, because I happen to know that also, 1935. I'm not going to go exact. Like I said, I like to be broad to start with, and I'm going to type in a location unless I get a lot of hits for the same name, so then I need to narrow it down further. So I'm now going to click on search up the top here, or down the bottom. And looking at my list of results here, I can see that the first result appears to be a match. If I hover over it, the Victorian Australian Marriage Index, it tells me Ronald James Barassi, and yes, the spouse correctly is Elsa Bryant Ray. The next option down is the reference number, which is an important number if you're wanting to follow that up. The next stage is with the Victorian Birth, Deaths and Marriages Department, and either go into view or purchase a copy of that certificate. You will find information on that, some very valuable information actually, on both Ronald James's parents and also Elsa Bryant's parents, and you get things like dates of birth or age numbers, which then you can calculate calculate back to what their date of birth was, so their year of birth anyway. So that's very, very useful information. You then can go back now. Well, in terms of this list, what I've searched, which was birth, marriage and death, I can then, if I'm wanting to, go down a bit further, scroll down the list and see if there's anything there that may contain Ronald James's birth details. So if I scroll down, I can see that the Victorian Australian Birth Index actually has a record for Ronald James Barassi, who was born in 1913. We're able to view this data here, this summarised version, because it falls outside the 100-year time restriction period. So, and I also do know that his father's name was Carlo Giuseppe Barassi, and his mother's maiden name was Dale. Her first name was, I'm not too sure, her first name was Anne Connolly. That's it. So we can then follow back that link, and that's the way it tends to work. You keep following back links and verifying it as you go with each stage of the ancestors that you discover, and just verifying that, yes, they are connected to that family tree. If I wanted a copy of either of those records for my own record keeping, I could always click on the actual record itself, which then takes me to another option to be able to send the document, as in email the document, home to my home email, which is quite a useful thing to do too. So that's I'll just show you in terms of typing in. Just a matter of typing in your email there and confirming email, click send email, and there we go. We have success. The record has now been emailed to my email address. Finally, I'd like to thank you for your time today. I encourage you all to have a play with Ancestry.com and join me on Friday the 28th of August for a live group discussion on any further ancestry questions that you may have. You can book for this through Eventbrite via the CGD Library's website, and I look forward to talking to you about your family history discoveries. Thank you.